The next topic we're going to talk about is a glossary. Glossary allows you or your students to put terms into a place, and in those terms it can link inside the course. So if a student is working on something, for example, if I were doing a glossary for accounting, it may, every time debit comes up, it may link the definition to where the student can hold the mouse over and it will give them the definition of that word. What you need to make sure of is if you turn that on, you turn it off when a student is taking a test or those kind of things. So a glossary is a place that you can put terms in, students can put terms in, you can have multiple students put terms in. So depending on what you want to do with that glossary is how you set it up. And we're going to talk about some of those things on this video. So I'm going to turn my editing on, and I'm going to add an activity, and that activity is going to be a glossary. And again, it gives you definition, it gives you some ideas as far as how you're going to use it. I like that they say, remember, it doesn't just have to be terminology. It can be handy tips. It can be sharing useful videos. It can be resources. So there's a lot of things that it can be. It doesn't have to just be definition of words. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a glossary, and we'll just call this first time glossary. And we can give it a definition. This is the glossary that will be used for the entire course. Again, you can say, do you want it displayed or not displayed? You have main glossary, secondary glossary. Main glossary, and this, it gives you, in case you forget, it gives you the definition here. A main glossary can take in the secondary glossary. Main glossary can also be the one that the teacher sets up, that students can't add to it. If I'm going to have a glossary of websites that students can go to, I want to put those in. I don't want to have students putting those in. Then I maybe want to set up a main glossary. So you can only have one main glossary per course. You can have as many secondary glossaries as you want. In some of my courses, when I was teaching more courses, I would set up glossaries for every chapter, and every student had to put 5 words into that glossary. So there were some things like that that you can do. So we're going to leave this just as a secondary glossary. My entries, there's several questions that you need to put in. Do you want to have them just automatically approved, or do you want to have to go in and approve every single entry that comes? I always leave mine as yes. Always allow editing. I don't. If I'm having students put words in, I don't want them editing each other's words, and so I say no. If you are doing this to where you want every student to define 10 words, then you need to turn the duplicate entry off. If you want it set up to where every student has to have 5 words and it has to be different, then you want to say no duplication of entries. So it depends on what you're using this for. Allow comments on entries. Do you want students to make comments on other people's entries? Yes or no, depending on what it is that you're doing. If you're doing a glossary and everyone has to put a website that they found, and you want students to comment on each other's websites, then you could put yes on this. Automatically link glossary entries, and this is what I was talking about before. If this glossary is words that are going to be used in the class, and I want them to be available so when the word comes up in the class, it automatically gives the definition of the word, I leave this as yes. If I don't want that to happen, then I leave this as no. This is what I was referring to, that you need to make sure you go back and change that to no before a test or before something like that, so that they're not going back and checking those definitions. Appearance, do you want it to be simple dictionary style? Do you want it to be encyclopedia entry? So there's several different ways you can have it entered as far as how you want it to look when the student goes into it. Again, if you click on the question mark, it tells you how these entries are going to show up. Do you want the author's name on them? In other words, if students are doing this, do you want it to show with the author's name? We're going to leave it default for right now. How many entries per page? Again, I would keep this to a minimum because if a student has to scroll long distances, they're not going to do it. Do you want them listed by alphabet links to where they can, if they're looking for the word debit, they can click on D and go straight to debit? Do you want to show all? So down at the bottom, if you have it as 10 and you have a student that wants to look at all of them at one time, then you would go ahead and click all. They could click all and show them all at all time. Special links, if you're putting any special links inside your glossary entries, you want to put this as yes. Do you want to allow them to print the glossary? Yes or no, and depending on if you want them to be able to print. Again, all of these items has question marks beside it that you can go in and go, okay, wait a minute, I'm not sure what the different formats are. You can click on that question mark. Grade, again, do you want to grade in this course? Here's where you're just putting it in the category. Here's where you're actually, and this gets a little confusing, this is where you're actually putting it into what chapter in the grade book does this go in. This is where you're actually putting the information. So roles with permission to rate, how are you going to set your rating up? I leave it to where I'm the one who rates. Aggregate, again, it's just like the forums. Do you want an average of weightings, count of ratings, how many times do they post in the glossary, whether it's right or wrong, maximum and minimum, and then sum of ratings. And like I said, usually what I choose is sum of ratings. Minimum, once they if the minimum is 5, once they post 5 entries, it automatically gives them 10 points or whatever you set. Again, I usually set mine as sum of rating. I do points. I put whatever I want my points to be in here. You can put restrictions as far as ratings on those items. Common module settings, again, do you want it to show? Do you want it to hide? Do you want it to have an ID number that the student has to have the ID number in order to go in? Remember, any of these extra items you put on, you're going to be responsible for getting that information to the students. So you don't want to make it a lot more work on yourself. Activity completion, you can say, show activities complete when conditions are met. Student must view the activity. Students must receive a grade. Student must create so many entries. And so I usually use this, students must create so many entries, and it just depends on what you have set up in your course. And then tags and competencies are the same as before. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to save and return to course. I had first time as my glossary. When I click on first time, it comes in and it says, what do you want to do? I want to add, the students is going to see this same page. I want to add a new entry. I put in debit. Debit is the left side of the account. I come down and I can attach a file if I want to. I can put a picture in here if I wanted to show what a debit is. So I have all of the same items that I have on any text box that I do inside of Moodle. Auto linking right now is on, so I leave that alone, and then I click on Save Changes. I can go back in and do as many entries as I want, but you'll see how the entries are coming up. I can link this. I can trash this as the teacher, or I can go in and edit it as the teacher.